Hey, everybody, welcome to my podcast. My name is Fernando. Everybody calls me Fernie, and I am a professional psychic medium and spiritual teacher. And on today's episode, we are going to discuss the difference between channeling, spirit energy, and possession. Because a lot of people have some interesting ideas for what spirit channeling is, what possession is, and anything to do with that. Now, this topic might sound a little scary, and it can sound a little intimidating. Trust me, it is not. It actually is pretty basic and down to earth. So I did want to cover that though, because a lot of people get so scared these days, and they watch too much TV. They watch haunted movies about hauntings and possession, and you've got like the Exorcist that came out and then came out again, and people have a lot of ideas for what possession is, and they don't really understand it. So I want to go back a little bit to when I first began channeling spiritual energy or spirit energy, because the moment that occurred is not exactly what I had expected or what I thought was going to take place. So when I had first started channeling spirit energy, this was back when I had just started doing psychic readings. And I had people who would call me up at home, and I would do a reading for them over the phone. And then, I just answer their questions as well. And I would do that. During the day, I would go to work as a telemarketer. And then after I'd get off of work, I'd take the bus home, go home, and then there'd be people starting to call wanting readings. So that's pretty much how it all started up. And I remember that first day I went home when I had people calling me. My mom was like, "There are a bunch of people calling you, and they keep wanting readings. I don't know what they're asking for." And I said, "Oh, okay, well," and I explained it to her and all of that. But back then, I would just tune into people's energy field, and then I would just like tell them what I saw for them, whatever came to mind is whatever I would share with them. And it was a lot less structured. My readings back then were way less structured, so they didn't really have the structure I have now, which is I talk about everything from like your love life and your health and your finances and career and work and all of that. So back then I would just pick a topic or pick an area that would come up for me the strongest, and then I would just kind of talk about that for a few minutes and share what I got. And that's pretty much how I did it. And this one woman had called me, and back then I honestly didn't really fully understand mediums. I was more familiar with the psychic aspect of things because I had seen Sylvia Brown on television. I had seen a few other psychics on some of those what is it, unsolved mystery shows. So I knew what a psychic was. I just didn't fully understand what a medium was. And even though I'd seen like the John Edwards show at that point, and I'd also seen Ghosts, etc., I just didn't fully grasp it because people think psychics and mediums are the same thing, and they are not. A psychic is someone who can sense details and information that they wouldn't have had any way of knowing other than just tuning in through the minds, through the mental processes, through your psychic senses. Medium is someone who basically connects with loved ones, those on the other side, and brings through that information. So a psychic isn't necessarily a medium, but all mediums are psychic because mediums are kind of like another layer or another version of a psychic. They just connect differently with the information, and they're focused on specific connections with those in spirit. So this was back when I was still a teenager, and this is the earlier days because I was working at the time, so I did have a job, but I started working like as soon as I could work. So as soon as I turned like 16 or 17, I was already working. And this one woman called me, and she had mentioned to me she had asked me if I could connect with her husband who passed away. And I was like, I don't know. I've never been asked to connect with those who have passed away, and I don't really know what that would I don't really know what that would be like. I've never done it. I mean, I can try, but I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing there. And I still was under the impression that when you connect with a spirit, you're like, you've got a spirit standing in front of you, or you're seeing them, or you're talking to them. And all the shows that I used to watch where there were psychics or mediums connected to spirits, they'd say, so and so is standing right next to you, and they're wearing this color dress, and they're looking like this, and I'm just like, how do they see this? Like, how are they seeing things with their eyes? Well, they weren't. It's all in the mental eye. Most mediums don't see actual people in front of others. They may see it in their mind's eye, but they may not actually see it with their physical eyes. And I know a lot of people like, what do you mean? What do you mean? People can have experiences. I'm not saying people don't do that, or people can't do that. I'm just saying most mediums don't operate that way. If they did, then, if I could see a spirit and if it were that easy, then I would simply say, okay, everybody, we're all going to learn sign language. And so this is the language, this is sign. And if you want to communicate, you need to use sign language. And that way I could just interpret what they want me to say verbatim instead of trying to figure it out through like, oh, what are you saying? I know you're standing there, but are you little teapot? Are you making a little teapot? Like what, me trying to figure out what they're saying. It doesn't make any sense. If people could see them, then why not use sign language? That's just my thinking process. But, I got all off on sign language. Let me get back. What was I talking about? What was I referring to? Oh yeah. So, this first time this woman called me, she wanted me to connect with her deceased husband. I said, I don't know. I'll give it a shot, see what happens. So I started trying to connect, and I just basically closed my eyes and just opened myself up to whatever came. And it was the same way that I was doing my psychic readings, but I was just trying to see if maybe I could get some information that related to this woman's husband. Well, sure enough, I started having a memory surface. And when the memory surfaced, it was a memory of my own cousin. Now, my cousin, in this particular memory or visual in my mind, this cousin was a cousin who he was very much into Western wear. He would wear cowboy hats. He would wear like blue jeans, and he always wore cowboy boots. And I remember that. And so I was like, okay. And so this image came into my mind, and I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And back then I didn't realize the significance of memories and how spirit or how your psychic abilities use your memories as a form of communication or information. So I didn't understand that the memory meant something. I just thought, why am I seeing my cousin? And I didn't understand, and I just didn't get it. And so I asked her, I said, is your husband, is his name Nicholas or Nick? She's like, no. And I was like, okay. And I said, well, because that was my cousin's name. So I thought maybe I'm just seeing this because it's supposed to be, there's something that's supposed to match up. And I said, okay, is he kind of like, does he like going to like parties and dances? And is he always dancing like boot scoot and boogie and stuff? And she's like, no. I was like, well, okay. So then I was like, I was getting nervous, and I was a little, put off by it, but I said, okay. And I started talking to myself, and I'm like, God, like, please show me something that makes sense. I don't know what this means. Show me something that makes sense. And then I very specifically remember in the memory a visual of my cousin's boots, and he had these ugly, just god awful ugly boots, and they were like cream snake skin colored boots, and they had like half beads sticking out of them, and it was all over the boot. And I specifically remember that because like those are god awful ugly. But I thought to myself, well, I keep seeing that over and over and over again. Like there's something special about this boots. And I said, I have a question. Did he ever wear these cream colored snakeskin boots with half beads sticking out of them? Because I keep being like fixated on these boots. And she's like, oh my God, yes, those are his favorite boots. And I was like, okay, like who has cream colored snakeskin boots with a half bead sticking out? I'm like, okay. And I was like, okay. And then I just started to describe other things that were coming through. So that was my first like real opportunity to connect with the spirit through mediumship for a client. And I remember, like, it gave her so much peace, and she cried, and because there were other things that came through that I didn't know. But it was interesting because I didn't even know what I was doing. All I did was just try, and then it used the same the same processes that my psychic ability used. So I was pretty blown away. I was like, wow, I didn't realize I could do this. And that was my very first experience channeling and connecting with a spirit energy. Now, after that, I did have another experience which was very different, nothing like that at all. And I would say that the next experience I had was more like a possession than it was a psychic, a spirit trying to channel through me. So when I'm channeling with a spirit, I am giving them permission to use my faculties. I'm giving them permission to use my body. If there's any sensations they want to give me, I'm more than welcome to them. If they want to use, they're welcome to using my mind, all of my thoughts, all of my memories. They're welcome to use all of that. And so many times when a spirit is communicating with me and sharing that information, they are giving me details that have to do with their lives, but they're using my faculties. They're using my thoughts, my memories to make sense of the information. Same thing with my body. Sometimes I take on mannerisms that certain spirits will use, and I don't realize it because I'm not paying attention to myself. I'm only just being like myself and being like loose and whatever, however I function. And there are times where people have commented, you look just like him when you were doing that. That's the way he would do it. So it's pretty interesting that there are subtle forms of possession, which is the spirit just taking me over, taking my body and using it. But I never lose control. I never lose the ability to end a connection. I never lose the ability to do anything other than just receive and share it at my choosing. I don't feel forced in any way, shape, or form. So I had an experience. I think this was probably around the same time that I had been doing readings. Because back then I also used to meditate a lot. I would meditate so much, it was unreal. And I would spend like a good hour or two a night meditating before I went to sleep. So in this particular occasion, I had meditated for approximately 1 or 2 hours. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to go to sleep now. And before I went to sleep, I talked to God. I said, God, show me what I'm capable of. Show me the extent of the kind of abilities that I possess or what I'm able to do with my ability. And so I remember, and back then I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with my mom. We were poor. I grew up poor. So I wasn't used to having like a lot of space or a lot of my own room. I think I'd had that for like a little bit of time growing up, but most of my life I usually had to share space with somebody. So I remember we had our living room. It was a 1-bedroom apartment. My mom had the bedroom. I slept in the living room area, and I had a mattress on the floor, and that's what I slept on, as a mattress on the floor. And right in front was our television and our VCR. So I remember going to sleep. I went ahead and got on the mattress on the floor, and I was asleep on my stomach. And I went to sleep, and I had dreams, and I remember the dreams. I somewhat remember those dreams, but I dreamt about, belts for some reason. I was dreaming about wearing belts and being in different places, different people's houses wearing belts. But it was just a weird dream. It was a random dream. I had no sense to it whatsoever. And then at the end of that like segment, or the end of that dream, I felt this crazy sensation on my physical body. As I said, I was asleep. I had my hands below, kind of underneath my chin, asleep on my stomach. And I felt as if someone took a bucket of ice cold water and just dumped it across my entire back area. And it was so cold. It was so freezing cold, and it hit with such force that I was just kind of like in shock. And it immediately snapped me out of my dream because I remember I was dreaming and then I felt it and I came to. And when I came to, I opened my eyes and there in front of me, I was staring at my television screen and at my VCR. And my hands, they pushed upwards, almost like I was doing like a push up, except I was doing a push up almost like in a upward facing dog. So if you've ever seen yoga, there's that upward facing dog, kind of like I'm arching my back downwards, my hands are pushing me up, and I was just looking up at the television and the VCR, just looking higher at it. But it was just so weird. And it hit so quickly and it was so cold and I was just caught off guard. The next thing I remember, my eyes flashed as if someone had like flashed my eyes almost like a camera, and then everything was in like monochromatic tones. Everything was blacks and whites and grays. So it almost felt like you're watching like a show in gray or in black and white, but there's grays. So everything was like that. And I didn't know where I was. And I remember being in this position where, first of all, I didn't recognize where it was at first, but now that I think back to it, I keep thinking back to my aunt's house. Because she had this like a living room area, and then it was connected with the dining room area, and then you'd go into the hallway. There's two bedrooms there, and so it's like a bungalow. It's an old style bungalow house. But I remember being on the floor of a house like that, and I was being dragged backwards, and my legs were stretched out on the floor, and all I could see, like my head was like just kind of leaning forward and just kind of like that, and all I could see was my body. And so I could see my body and I could see like my what I was wearing, which I was wearing blue jeans and a red plaid shirt, which was kind of weird, because I didn't. It was funny because now I'm sitting here and I'm staring directly at my red plaid robe. So it's very similar to that, but it was a red plaid shirt and it was almost like cowboy wear. And then I was wearing blue jeans and I was just being dragged. I don't even remember what kind of shoes I was wearing. I just remember I was being dragged and I felt like hands underneath my arms pulling me backwards and backwards and backwards. And as soon as I realized what was going on and what was happening, I mean, all I could see was where my head was facing. That's all I could see. I couldn't move any of the limbs. I couldn't move myself. I couldn't I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even blink my eyes. I had no control over my eyelids. So I was like, what the fuck is going on? And I was being dragged backwards and I freaked out. And then I was like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. I almost felt like I was being dragged to my death. Like someone was about to drag me somewhere and chop me up or do something. But I felt like someone was pulling me towards them. And I freaked out and I was like trying to snap out of it. And I thought, this is this is a dream. It must be a dream. It must be a dream. And I tried to like shake my face, shake my head, shake my body. Nothing would move. Nothing would react. And I couldn't even blink. And I was like, oh my God. And like I had no control, motor control. So I was like, oh, let me try again. Let me snap myself out of this. Let me wake up. And then I shook my head again and nothing happened. Just same thing. I'm continuously being dragged. But the third time I'm like, no, like God. And I clearly remember telling God, like, I'm not ready for this yet. Please don't let this happen. I don't want to experience this. I'm not ready for this yet. And I shook my head an attempt to shake my head a third time. And when that happened, immediately my eyes flashed again. And when my eyes flashed, I was in that arched upward facing dog like position. And all I could see were the TV and the VCR right in front of me. And whatever that experience or whatever that sensation of something cold like slamming into my back, whatever sensation that was, it like went in reverse and slammed out of my back, if that makes any sense. And then my whole body, my entire body felt almost electrocuted. Like there was just like surge of energy going through my body. And I felt all these weird little sensations. And it almost reminded me of whenever your foot falls asleep or your thigh falls asleep, and then you try to wake it up and it starts to tingle a little bit and it's all running through it. That's what it felt like, except it wasn't painful, but it felt very weird. And it was my whole body felt that way. And I was just like, oh my God, what just happened? Like I didn't know what happened. And I was so freaked out and I was so scared and I didn't know what had occurred. And I immediately got up and I turned on the light because I was just freaked out. And I was like, fuck this shit. I ain't going to sleep tonight, you know? So I sat there just freaked out. I mean, just completely terrified under the covers. And I just waited and waited and waited and waited. Couldn't sleep. I think I was awake for another 2 hours, and then I finally fell back asleep. And I slept with the lights on, if that makes any sense. But I was just like, no, ma'am, I don't think so. So that was a crazy experience. And I, to this day, I have suspicions of what that was. Um, and I think it was God showing me that I would at some point have the ability to allow spirit to take me over and show me what they want to show me. And so, you know, I do that to some extent to this day, but not to that level, not to that extreme. But I also think that part of that has more to do with me channeling higher energies, you know, connecting with higher forms of beings and higher energies. Aja being one of them, which is my higher self, my God, my soul is named Zaja. So I think it's my way of prepping for that. And I think this was God showing me, or the universe showing me, hey, this is what you're going to be able to do at some point, but it's going to feel like this. Like you're literally going to be like taken over and something's going to work through you. Um, and that's the closest thing that I would say was like a possession. But you know, and I look at it in retrospect, you know, people might think, oh, you know, you were possessed by evil, or something, you know, took you over, or this is evil, or something like that. No, I don't think I was possessed by evil. I don't think that this was some evil force, or anything like that. I think this was just God answering my prayers, God showing me, universe showing me what would come one day. So I don't think this is evil at all. But because I was so scared, it's so easy. You know, anything that we're scared of as people, anything that we're afraid of or frightened of, we immediately throw into like the evil pile. Like, oh, it must be evil. Oh no, you had this really scary experience, it must be some evil form of evil. It's not. A lot of things that we experience are pretty normal, you know, paranormal experiences that a lot of people have, but people automatically want to associate that with evil. And it's not. People jump to conclusions too quickly when dealing with that. So yeah, that was what I would say was a possession. Now, when I think of these people, like when I think of like the movies like The Exorcist and things like that, I mean, Hollywood has really done a number on all of us because it's made it seem like we get into positions where we can't have control over anything. And when you go back and, you know, look back onto the experiences some people have had under possession, I mean, you can only find negative stuff, right? When do you ever hear of positive possessions or positive experiences like that, where, you know, some special being or something healing happened through someone's body, or someone's, you know, a spirit connected and helped others in that way. Honestly, I believe that we have positive possessions a lot more than we realize. And everybody wants to talk about the negative stuff, but people are actually possessed by positive things all the time. Sometimes children will become possessed by their loved ones in spirit because they want to show you a message or they want to share something with you. I know people who may become possessed by guides or by angels because and they act out in a form of like protection or saving others or helping others, etc. And it may be a very short period of time or a moment when this occurs, but I believe that happens, you know, sometimes when you hear the stories of, you know, a woman who was able to lift an entire vehicle to get it off her child. I believe that she was possessed by angelic energy or by, you know, spiritual energy helping her to make that happen. So I mean, it's very possible that people are possessed by angelic beings and by positive spirits regularly, but we only think about the negative stuff because there's everything that's scary or everything that people don't know is an evil thing. When it's not. It's not. So if you ever felt like you're being possessed or you're being taken over, I mean, it could very well just be you channeling energy and not really experienced with that, and you're missing some of the signals there. It's also possible you could have had experienced like myself as well. A lot of times, I hate to say this, but a lot of times people are suffering from a form of mental illness. I mean, you hear about these stories where someone thought that a devil possessed them or a demon possessed them. And it makes me sad because many times people, in the Hispanic culture, people will believe curses before they go to like a doctor to get a physical. They'll think, "Oh, someone's cursed me. That's why I'm suffering." Instead of going to the doctor, and the doctor say, "Hey, FYI, your thyroid's messed up. You need some medication. Here, take this pill. It'll help you get better." People will believe those things more than going and dealing with like asking a doctor for help or checking to see if there's a logical explanation for things. It happens all the time. It kind of makes me sad. And so a lot of times when people are going through a form of possession, quote unquote possession, I always propose that they go get checked out by a doctor or by a physician, because it could be something very biological, very natural, very normal, but something that still needs to be taken care of by a doctor. When my mom became and she started having her first schizophrenic episodes, I remember she said she was hearing voices, and she also felt the urge. They were telling her to stab people. So we had to live in the house with her, and she was always in fear that she was going to wake up, walk over, and stab one of us. So it was frightening, to say the least, very frightening. So yeah, but that's possession. That's the idea behind possession that people carry for the most part. So well, I hope, guys, that my podcast today has helped you understand some things about the difference between spiritual communication and possession, or the potential of possession. I love you all, and I want you all to stay safe, to stay intentional. If you do any kind of psychic work, if you develop in any way, shape, or form, make sure that you're asking for good things to connect with you. Make sure that you're trying to connect with the positive, with the light, because once if you start to activate and start to draw to you negativity through your own choices, that's a path that you probably may not even know how to deal with once it happens, or you may just get lost in all of that, and then you really start dealing with some real shit. So if you guys haven't seen my website, check it out. It's www.fernandomarone.com. You can also visit me on Facebook and also on Instagram and on YouTube. If you're not on YouTube, check out my YouTube channel. I've got tons of content in there for you. Feel free to subscribe. Please subscribe, because you'll find out when I release new content. Also, I'm on Snapchat and also on Twitter, so you can find me on there sometimes as well. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. I love you all, and I will see you next week. Okay, bye bye.